Kuma and Mary being the same race of special people, of which I call Afro-Jin? Is Jewelry Bonney a clone of Big Mom? And is there more proof that Vegapunk learned how to extract souls and is using that to power the Seraphim? All of that will be discussed in today's theory. But before we even get into that, I want to talk about future videos. One of them is, who is the lady on Kuma's Bible? I think I have an answer for that. The second one is it possible that Corazon is still in the world of living and known as Karasu? And thirdly, of course, I gotta go way more in depth in why I believe Vegapunk studied the occult to create the Seraphims. Now, let's start with the Afro-Jin. If you don't know what it is, I've been talking about it for quite some time on my channel. Basically, I think JoyBoy was a sheep mink. Actually, half sheep, half Lunarian. And there's a ton of evidence. You have to watch the video to understand. Then I made a follow-up video talking about why I believe Kuma is related to JoyBoy in some way, and it has to do with his hair. I'll even play the clip right now. In my most recent video, I make the claim that the reason Jewelry Bonney refers to Kuma as from a special people is because he has an afro, and he's what I will call an Afro-Jin. Get it? Because it rhymes with African. An Afro-Jin just means Afro people. Well, to further cement this, we have to then look at the other points I made in the video, which was that JoyBoy is the original Afro-Jin, I guess, and JoyBoy is a stand-in for Jesus. Well, as crazy as that sounds, we have seen in the story a character with an afro that was executed on a cross. I mean, come on, the evidence is just there. It's staggering. I mean, that's just what I mentioned in the 60-minute video. Just imagine all the evidence I have in the main video. So in the link in the description, click on that and you'll find the rest of the evidence. Well, I believe one of the very first Afro-Jin we've seen in the story was named Mary, who, if by no coincidence, is sheep-like. But he's not a mink. And that's the interesting thing. There are animal-like humans in the world of One Piece that are not minks. The biggest tell of what is or isn't a mink is whether or not they have fur that covers their entire body. So, for example, there was Masira and Soju. These were the guys who would excavate broken ships, and they were friends with Monk Blake Cricket. They look like monkeys, but they were confirmed to just be regular humans by Oda. And you can tell because they're not covered in fur. A lot of body hair, but not covered in fur. So, what is this phenomenon? I think it's related to people from probably around the Void Century that are special, who then passed on this lineage down. Now, I don't think that like Masira and Shoju are Afro-Jin. Of course, they don't really seem like they have afros, but they don't have to be Afro-Jin to also be special people. It depends on who they descended from. And I think there's a good chance there's going to be a very special monkey mink in the past, probably based off of Sun Wukong, and probably close to JoyBoy. Now, what's interesting about this idea of someone being kind of crossed between human and animal but not being mink is within the mink tribe, usually they're homogenous in terms of what animal they're based off. So what I mean by that is if they're based off an animal, they're only based off that one animal. But there's actually a special case. Peckhams is a lion, but he weirdly has an afro. It always comes back to the afro. Peckhams has an afro for a mane, but we know of a lion mink in the story named Shishi Lion, and he does not have that afro. He has very long flowing hair. So what's going on here? Now, I know that Peckhams has a zone fruit and can turn into a turtle, but that is not what I'm talking about in terms of this cross. But that could be Oda, kind of like hinting towards it in a more overt way, but there could be a covert hybrid going on with Peckhams. The reason I say this is if you look at Peckham's parents, first of all, one of them is a monkey. Again, a monkey shows up in this whole topic, and the other is a bear. But if you look at his mom, who's a bear, there's something about his mom's fur. It's like really woolly and puffy, almost like sheep's wool. There's something really odd about her. It just doesn't add up. Like bears usually don't have that type of fur, So why is it just so woolly? It's odd. It almost makes her look like a sheep. And if you look at the hair of Peckham's, it's very much woolly like a sheep. And Peckham's is interesting because he never was able to master Sulong form. And the great irony of that is that Sulong means moon lion. This actually plays a huge role in my whole JoyBoy is a sheep mink, is this whole connection between lion and minks. Because Jesus is associated to two animals, sheeps and lions. And the lion actually represents like Jesus transcending and evolving, which is kind of like what Sulong does for the minks. But like in an ironic twist, one of the lion minks can't master Sulong, but maybe there's something to that. Like maybe his Sulong is more powerful than the other ones for these sort of both lion and sheep-like features of Peckham's. So the more powerful it is, the harder it is to control. In fact, I think that applies to like a lot of things, like zones. The more powerful the fruit, the harder it is for it to awaken and control awakening. That's why we haven't seen a lot of ancient zones or mythical zone awakenings. Now, I'm kind of rambling a little bit. There is something to be said. And it's the fact that this idea of there's a mink, and that is like a set in stone species. But then there's this sort of like hybrid thing going on that kind of makes a special person. If you aren't this specific established species, but you're just showing hints of other species, then there's probably more potential for you to grow as a person. And I think this is actually shown in the Vinsmokes, because the whole reason Vinsmokes are special is that Judge was messing with the bloodline limit. Is it called bloodline limit? I believe it is. It's also called lineage factor. I think both of those are relevant terms. And basically he was like splicing different animal DNAs into his children. But if you notice, they themselves don't show overtly animal features at all. So something about having animal DNA somehow gave them elemental powers. So, what is up with that? But I think we're finally starting to see where Oda is going with this. Basically, what's relevant to this chapter is the fact that Kuma has bear ears. Like, what? That's just so odd. For the most part, we thought it was his hat. Now, we could argue that it is his devil fruit. And I'm sure there's something to that, his devil fruit being involved in this. But if you've been following my channel, I've talked about devil fruit gravity. And I think that devil fruits actually sort of lure in and draw in who eats the devil fruit. And whoever eats the devil fruit, or basically the devil fruit itself, kind of tells a lot about the user. So for example, I don't think it's a coincidence that Luffy ate the fruit of Nika. It's probably because there's something special about Luffy that drawn in Nika. So there's probably something special about Kuma that would even draw him to the pawpaw fruit and get bear ears if it's linked to his devil fruit. But what's interesting is, how long has Kuma had the pawpaw devil fruit? Now you could argue, the time we saw him without a hat and he didn't have ears, like when he was holding up Bonney, that was before he ate the devil fruit. Granted, that could be completely the case, but we actually seen Kuma as a kid, and he's fully shaven, which is a really interesting detail. Like, Oda doesn't do that too often, like completely have such a drastic hair change for someone in the past, especially something as deliberate as shaving. To be that clean shaven, you have to consistently shave your hair. That's not something that just happens. He didn't just one day have a growth spurt of hair. Like, that's not a thing that really happens. So he had to consistently be shaving his head for it to be like that. So then it begs the question, why did he feel the need to constantly shave his hair? Well, maybe, he didn't want to be found out as a special person, as an Afro Jin. And when you look in the story, as crazy as it seemed to think of this idea of what, an Afro person is special, well, there's a lot of people that have Afro or woolly hair and are special. King Neptune, for example, Rob Lucci. Rob Lucci does have straight hair, but when he awakens, it becomes woolly, and we're going to talk about that. That's actually not specifically just awaken. When he enters his devil fruit, he gets woolly hair, and we'll talk about that a little more. But let me just list off more Afro Jins. Blackbeard has that woolly hair. Let's look at Straw Hats, Usopp and Brook. Brook is the Soul King, and there's so many implications with that. Usopp has so many ties to Nolan, and if you notice, Nolan has a shaved head similar to Kuma, that very clean cut shape. But unlike Cricket, Mont Blanc Nolan, the chestnut on his head is not a hat. Notice that Cricket, who doesn't shave his hair, has a chestnut hat, but Nolan, his hair is the chestnut, and the fact that his hair stands up and forms a circular shape probably means that if he fully grew out his hair and didn't shave around it, he would have an afro. Yasue has an afro, and I mentioned that in my theory about the Afrogens and Kuma and Jesus, but shout out to Daksake. He pointed out to me that Yasue's name sounds like Yahweh, but it also sounds like Yeshua, and Yahweh is reference to God, and Yeshua is reference to Jesus. So his name sounds like both those things. So I didn't even think about that. So thank you so much, Daksake. But yeah, I think I've showed enough Afrogens. One day I'll make a really dedicated video to it. But let's focus on Rob Lucci for a second. His hair becomes more woolly when he enters his devil fruit form. Well, there's actually a artificial smile user named Sheep's Head. And of course, his zone animal is a sheep. And if you notice, his hair for some reason becomes an afro. And it's not like his devil fruit is all over his body. It actually only affects his hands and his hair. And it's not connected from his hands to his hair. His hands are transformed. His whole arm and chest and neck is normal. And then his hair is an afro. It's like this weird detail Oda decided to put in there. And again, just more Afrogen proof. So with Kuma having that bear ears, I do believe it's related to his hair. And Mary also has an afro, and it's woolly because he's related to sheep, but he also has horns. Now that's the really interesting thing. Why the horns though? Is he mink? Well, no, because he's not covered from head to toe. We've seen what sheep minks look like. They don't look like Mary. So that's a very interesting detail that Mary has the horns. And like I said, I think that JoyBoy is a sheep mink. And Kuma's daughter is Jewelry Bonney, who said, Kuma's a special person, not her. So that clearly shows that she is probably adopted by Kuma. Check out PolipedeWorks' video on that. It's fantastic. And he's making a follow-up one featuring me. So definitely watch that one before the part 2 comes out. But anyway, even though she's not a special person and doesn't have afro hair, what she does have is the initials JB, like JoyBoy, and that could play a role into why Kuma adopted her. So now let's move on to the next topic. It's actually the perfect segue. Why did Kuma adopt her? Well, what if she is the clone of Big Mom? I know that's crazy because there's not too much evidence pointing towards that. I mean, there's a ton of evidence showing the similarities between Jewelry Bonney and Big Mom, but not necessarily that she's a clone of Big Mom. However, at the beginning of the chapter, they're referencing a clone being made, in how we should treat that clone as still a normal human. Now, by the end of the chapter, it's revealed that Stussy is a clone. But the fact that they're talking about the clone at the beginning of the chapter and it's showing Jewelry Bonney makes you think that there could have been a double meaning there. So, if Jewelry Bonney is a clone of Big Mom, why does she look so different? Is it a crossover between Big Mom and somebody else? Maybe, but I actually have another idea. And before I go into my idea, I need a shout out to theories. Actually, I already shouted out the first one. PolipedeWorks, Jewelry Bonney is the sister of Perona. It's a fantastic theory. There's so many great evidence towards it. And by the end of that theory, he references this idea of pink hair and having relevance. And he brings up Big Mom and says that there could be a relationship between Big Mom and Jewelry Bonney and Perona. Well, this leads into my next theory recommendation from Mr. Bushido, in which he believes that Big Mom is actually one of the heirs of the Sorbet Kingdom. And that could be why she's related to Bonney. I'm probably butchering that, but I'm not here to recite his theory. Go check it out. I'm gonna leave a link in the description. Go read it. It's on Reddit. Upvote it. If you like it, share with other people. That's what the community is about. We share ideas and we support each other and uplift each other. So yeah, definitely go read it. Now, combining this idea of, Bonney being related to Big Mom and the Sorbet Kingdom with Kuma in the mix of my Afrogen, I have one more theory to add to this. It's the fact that I said I don't know if it's probably like around 2 years ago in my Red Sea theory, that I believe Big Mom is a mutant. Because I was going to show that I believe throughout the history of One Piece, there were special people that would advance human evolution. Mind you, I was talking about evolution way before Dr. Vegapunk brought it up in relation to devil fruits. But that was actually where my Red Sea theory was going, the relation between evolution and devil fruits. Funny enough. So the fact that I think there were people evolving and they were special isn't just physical evolution. I also believe there was sort of a spiritual evolution. But really, that's besides the point. Let's just talk about the evolution part. Evolution is about really, whenever there's a species and something deviates, if that deviation leads to longevity of the species and it leads them to producing, that's how evolution happened. It branches out. Now, what's interesting about Big Mom is I don't exactly think she falls into the evolution. That's the whole reason why I brought up the mutation. And the reason is that she doesn't pass on her special durability to her kids. So if she's not passing on her special durability to her kids, then why the heck would she be a part of evolution? I think she's actually a mutant that has a non-hereditary deviated gene, which means it's not going to pass on. So if she has this mutation that she can't pass on, if they were to clone Big Mom, and we're not even going to take in the fact that maybe it's a crossover, let's just leave it at cloning Big Mom. If they were to clone Big Mom, maybe they were making the attempt to replicate this non-passable gene. And because they weren't successful, they just had failed experiments. So perhaps Perona and Bonney are actually failed experiments at replicating Big Mom's special genes. In fact, this could have to do with the gigantification. The fact that they were trying to make giant people. Maybe they were studying Big Mom, or maybe Stussy, the original Stussy or the clone Stussy, got some of Big Mom's DNA and whatever. They were trying to replicate Big Mom for that special factor that can't be passed on. So yeah, that's just crazy. It's so cool how I can just pick like this part of my theory, somebody else's theory, put it all together, and it's just like boom. Jewelry Bonney's a clone of Big Mom that couldn't get her. It's actually very befitting because Jewelry Bonney's powers are about aging, and then we learn that her advanced powers is about alternative futures, just like Oda would show in the SBS. So in a way, Jewelry Bonney is kind of like an alternative Big Mom had she not been born a mutant. In fact, that probably just more of Mr. Bushido's theory, like that Big Mom was royal, but they just couldn't handle her, so they gave her away. And that means she literally could have been the daughter, or probably the daughter of the Queen Dowager that Jewelry Bonney pretended to be back in Reverie. And the fact that she was able to perfectly look like her was probably because she was cloned off her daughter. So yeah. Anyway, let's move on to the last topic, which was remember. All right, let's fast forward to when I remember. Now, there's just one more thing I want to talk about, and that's I'll talk about it real quickly. It's that Vegapunk is showing more evidence that he extracts souls, because that's a huge theory that I'm working on, is Vegapunk and the occult. And I haven't really brought it to this channel, but I did make a Reddit post about how I think that the green blood of the Seraphims is actually made from human souls, what I call ectoplasma. So ectoplasm is extracting, the spiritual essence of a person, and blood plasma is extracting from, is a liquid that you extract from blood, to put it really oversimplified. So this idea of extracting from blood plasma and extracting of ectoplasm, I combined to call ectoplasma, or known in the story as green blood. And the fact that he wanted to study Kuma, who literally has the power to extract parts of people's souls, or I don't think it extracts the entire soul. If the memories was Kuma's soul, I think Vegapunk would have been more blatant. He would have said the memories are your soul. But he sort of, he's figuring it out along the way. So even he doesn't completely understand it. But memories are a big component of the soul. And this is definitely true because of how we know Pudding's power interacts with Big Mom's power. So yeah, more proof. And of course, I'm going to include that in my future video. And yeah, it's a great chapter. Actually, this is one of my favorite chapters in a while. It had a really good plot twist. It wasn't oh, look at this silhouetted person whose name we don't know and we don't know what they look like. Oh, I'm getting so tired of that. Oda's been abusing that. No, it's just a really good, solid theory. It makes us look at other characters so differently. We look at Miss Bakken different. Is Weevil a failed clone of... Is Weevil a failed clone of a Whitebeard? Maybe. Or, this is actually nutty. What if Weevil is a failed clone of Whitebeard's lost son? And Whitebeard's lost son being Jack. Or, maybe Whitebeard didn't have a son, and Jack is also just a clone of Whitebeard. I mean, it's crazy when you bring up this whole clone thing. By the way, the whole Jack being the lost son of Whitebeard is not my theory. I saw it so long ago. It's not an original theory. I think it's pretty popular. I think a lot of people know about. If you don't, just look it up. It's a good one. And it actually would make sense if Jack was a clone, just because he was in Kaido's crew at such a young age. And it's so hard to believe that somebody so young would play such a prominent role in Kaido's crew. Because it wasn't just like he was just some kid. He would have been 8 years old back when they were fighting Odin. And it's like, he was shown to be like part of the battle. Like, he was shown to be like this ominous presence. There's like a silhouette of him and the other all-stars, King and Queen, and it really does make it seem like Jack played a good role in that battle. So it's like, why? I mean, even for Kaido, like an 8-year-old on the battlefield. But if he's a clone, then it does make some sense, because clones probably can have rapid aging. They could probably be like at least maybe 16 by the time they're 8. That's a more reasonable age. Luffy was 17 when the story started. So yeah, Jack being a clone is within the realm of possibility. And Whitebeard is a rocks pirate. Miss Bakken is a rocks pirate. So it makes sense that Whitebeard could also have been cloned, especially if Miss Bakken was the one who was providing the blood for the clones. In fact, if Miss Bakken was the one who was getting the blood for Vegapunk and Mads making the clone, it would probably make sense why Stussy could be the best clone of all of them. Because if they were able to make such a great clone like Stussy, why aren't there more of them? Why are we assuming that Weevil could be a clone of Whitebeard? If Weevil's a clone of Whitebeard, then they messed up badly. Even if Jack was a clone of Whitebeard, Jack is not that great. He would be failed cloned. I don't want to call him a failure. That's kind of mean. But, if Bonnie is a clone, obviously she's not as strong. So why, if there are clones of other Rocks members, is Stussy the only one that's seemingly like actually legitimately stable and powerful and appears like the clone? It was probably because Stussy probably gave her own blood, probably was able to give a lot of blood, and it was just authentic blood. You know what? Adding one more topic. Sorry, it's such a great chapter, so this is what you get. Orochi for some reason wanted Vegapunk, which is really weird. Why would Orochi want Vegapunk? What does Orochi know about Vegapunk that he's so interested in him? I mean, it just doesn't make sense, and Oda never followed up on it, so that means he's holding it in the chamber. It's going to become relevant one day. So it's probably because of Stussy, now that we know how relevant Stussy is to Vegapunk and the Cypher Pole, because Orochi went to the Cypher Pulse to request Vegapunk. And when the older, I think her name is Higurashi Kurozumi, she was showing her faces. I'm sure everybody already knows this. One of them looked like Shiki, and one of them looked like Miss Bakin. We now know in hindsight, although someone did made a theory about it 2 years ago. So shout out to that person. So why would Higurashi know Miss Bakin? Well, it's like I said, I think they are Cypher Pole agents. Now you might be wondering, well, how do we know that Miss Bakin is a Cypher Pole agent? Just because Stussy is a Cypher Pole agent doesn't mean that Miss Bakin was. Well, Miss Bakin might have been in the Rocks Pirate, but who's to say a Cypher Pole agent didn't infiltrate the Rocks Pirate? I mean, think about it. Like I just said, their main job is either bodyguard or espionage. And we know that Stussy does undercover work because she was literally at the tea party of a Yonko as an underworld boss. So she played the role of Cypher Pole and also someone in illegal activity, whether it be underworld or let's say if she tried to be a pirate. It's not that too different. You know, just look at Crocodile or Doflamingo. They played both. So Miss Bakin could have been someone that was in the underworld, a pirate, and Cypher Pole all at the same time. And of course her clone would be able to be capable of the same thing. In fact, it actually makes more sense for Stussy to be a Cypher Pole agent, because why in the world would the world government want to hire Stussy as a Cypher Pole agent if they know she's a pirate? And how would they not know she's a pirate? She's in the Rocks crew. They would definitely know everything about the Rocks crew. They would definitely know that what Stussy looks like. They would know Stussy's capabilities. So it doesn't make sense for them to be like, oh, hello lady that has the same name as Stussy and looks like Stussy. Sure, you can join the Cypher Pole. What kind of sense does that make? It only makes sense if they already had her in the group. Now, it does beg the question, why would Stussy even be able to get into Cypher Pole if she suddenly appeared younger, or like if a younger version? Well, there's two options. One, Stussy could have posed as Stussy's daughter. That's possible. Maybe Stussy had a daughter and it never came to fruition. Maybe Stussy was pregnant with Jack, bringing back the whole random theory about Jack. Maybe she was pregnant with Jack, something happened to the pregnancy, she lost her child. Maybe that's why Whitebeard's so fixated to be a father or whatever. But anyway, just crazy random stuff. Basically, it could have just been Stussy's daughter as a front, even though it was a clone of Stussy. And so one could argue that clones are the child of the people they cloned from. But that's not what I want to talk about. Let's go in the second option. Stussy was always meant to look young. And the fact that she has this vampire thing going on is more evidence toward that. And quite possibly they could have looked at Stussy staying young as just evident of whatever her powers are, whether it be Devil Fruit or a special race. It would make sense why they would expect her to always stay young. Now, then that asks the question, why is Miss Bakin old? Well, what if Vegapunk learned how to extract a Devil Fruit from a person without killing them? And how could that be possible? Well, he's already working on how to take the soul out of a person with Kuma. So in that research of how to extract souls, it would make sense why he would learn how to extract the spirit of a Devil Fruit out of a person and still have them be alive. So perhaps Miss Bakin has been basically, what's the word for it? Exorcised. You know, he was Dr. Vegapunk's an exorcist all of a sudden. He could extract that. Yeah, it just gets crazy, the amount of ideas this one chapter spawned. But if you stuck around this long, thank you so much. Look forward to my future videos. The reason I was gone for so long was actually because I was making so many videos and my computer was just getting worse and worse as time went on, and it just couldn't keep up. So I had to actually get a whole new computer. That's why I've taken such a long break. I actually wanted to make my videos a while ago. Like, I was already in the midst of making my Who's the Woman on Kuma's Bible. I can't wait to get that out to you. The Corazon Karasu thing, the Vegapunk thing, I said I was going to make that like 2 months ago, about Vegapunk being Occult. And there's one more I didn't mention that I'm really excited. There's this guy named Jackson Banner in the Rogers crew. Kev DOG made a great video about it. And I have this crazy theory. I might even wear a tinfoil hat for the video. That Jackson Banner might not actually be a human and is actually a Klabauterman. I'm not even going to explain myself. Have a good day.